What's goody with you all today? My name is RayGVT and welcome back to another Firewall Dragon deck profile. Last time we took a look at what the Firewall strategy is able to do now with all the recent support from both Cyberstorm Access and Monstrous Revenge, but today I want to bring you guys the more amped version of that deck that utilizes the full power of the Cyberse network and takes advantage of both the Mathmech and Ignister archetypes to really max out. It's no secret that the most optimal version of this deck pretty much has to make use of the Mathmech engine, so today I'm going to be exploring just that. As I said in my previous deck profile on Cyberse, Cyberse is a very large typing now, but the cards just synergize with each other so well that the card combinations available to you are almost endless. Today I'll be giving you guys a rundown on my version of the Firewall Dragon deck utilizing both the Mathmech and Ignister strategies. This is a deck that I've been taking with me to locals and I've been doing pretty well with it against most of the other decks running around right now. I feel like it can compete and keep up with most of the other decks on the scene, so I want to show you guys what it can do. Again, ratios are still being tweaked, so play around with the ratios as you see fit. If you haven't seen my part 1 of this deck profile, which is more just pure Firewall, do check that out too, as it's the main base for this deck right here. Anyways guys, enough talk, let's get to the profile. So for the monsters, up first, just like before, I've got 3 copies of Firewall Defensor and 1 copy of Firewall Phantom. Defensor is great for its effect, which allows you to special a Firewall monster from your deck. Again, very handy, especially now that we have some extra targets like Firewall Phantom and Firewall Guardian. And then Phantom being our searcher of the deck, it allows you to add any 1 Signet spell or trap from your deck to your hand, which is very helpful. We're not playing as many Signet cards in here, but it's still very helpful for the ones that we are playing. Next up, 3 copies of Parallel Exceed. This is such a good card and it's one of the best extenders that we have in the deck. You can summon it to a zone a link monster points to when you link summon, and then you can use its own effect to get another Parallel Exceed and cut its attack and defense in half. Good for getting some extra material out to go into all the link summoning that you be doing. 2 copies of Microcoder and 1 copy of Code Generator. Though this build doesn't focus as much on U-locking and extra linking like before, Microcoder is still important to the deck to get us our Signet cards to our hand, and because we run a number of other level 4s in here, it's more useful to link it off while it's on the field so we can add a level 4 or lower Cyberse from our deck to our hand. I only played 2 copies this time around though, because again, my main focus with this deck isn't to build a U-lock by summoning Code Talkers at every turn, but it's still important enough to run at least 2. Code Generator helps us send the Cyberse from our deck to our grave, just like last time with our target being Sea Archiver again. And speaking of, for some quick one-offs, I play 1 Sea Archiver, this is our target for Code Generator's effect again, and 1 Dotscaper, which is very similar with its grave effect. Both are extremely useful, and 1 copy of Eebly. Though again, this deck doesn't really focus on U-locking or Eebly locking your opponent out, the option is there when it comes up. And Cyberse Sage is here as our tuner for the deck and lets us summon our Disave Orb, which will come up later. When used for a synchro summon, it lets you add back a Cyberse monster or 1 ritual spell from your grave to your hand. Pretty useful still in this build. And now for the secondary archetype that I play in here too, and that's Mathmechs. Like I said before, it's no secret that the most optimal version of this deck pretty much has to include the Mathmech engine inside of it, but beyond just being an engine for our Firewall strategy, Mathmech just works so well and naturally in here, again largely due to the Cyberse typing just being able to synergize with itself so well. So in here I play 1 copy of each essential Mathmech monster, that being 1 circular, 1 diameter, 1 sigma, 1 addition, and 1 subtraction. All of these have their own unique effects on their own, but they also have additional effects when you use them to synchro or exceed summon a Mathmech monster. Diameter is a nice extender, allowing us to special a level 4 monster from our grave at the cost of having its effects negated, and when used for a synchro or exceed summon, that monster gains the ability to negate an opponent's card or effect. This is a once per turn effect, of course, they always will be. Sigma can be special to the field if you control no monsters in the extra monster zone while it's in your hand or grave, but it must be banished when it leaves the field. It also locks you into only being able to special summon Cyberse monsters for the turn, but in a deck like this, that's not a problem. When used for a synchro summon, it can be treated as a non-tuner, which can come in handy. And both addition and subtraction can be special summoned by targeting a face-up monster on the field and then summoning them. And then, depending on which one you're using, addition boosts the targeted monster's attack by 1000 attack, and subtraction decreases the targeted monster's attack by 1000 until the end of the turn. Both of these guys also lock you into only being able to special summon Cyberse monsters from the extra deck, but again, not a problem here. and circular needs no introduction. My only wish is that it would come back to 3. I was so bummed when it got limited, but I can understand why. But please come back to 3. And that's it for the Mathmech part of the main deck. I do play one Mathmech spell in here as well as one Mathmech-Ignister, but I'll go over those soon in the next sections. I know some people have some gripes with the Cyberse typing and how it's very exclusive to itself and pretty much always locking you to only being able to special summon like Cyberse monsters and such, but I think this is a good thing for when you're playing Cyberse archetypes. Of course, not every single Cyberse deck does this, but the majority of them do. Maybe I'm just a little biased because Cyberse is my favorite typing because it has some of my favorite decks in the whole game, but I really do think this is more of a good thing than anything. It kind of stops that whole problem of certain archetypes and cards being used as engines in a bunch of different decks and as a means to an end, which I personally think is a good thing, but I don't know, what do you guys think? I think Cyberse works the best when everything is just in archetype and a little more self-contained. Anyways, up next, I'm gonna go over the Ignister cards that we use in here to make this all work. There's not many, but let's take a look. Now, mind the proxy, but I play one copy of Bururu at Ignister, one Danmari at Ignister, and one Gachiri at Ignister. Again, this is just the proxy because I believe I left my Bururu at someone's place, but Bururu lets us dump another Ignister monster from our deck to our grave. The target in this case being Danmari, and when used to synchro summon a Cyberse monster, you can target any of the other cards that you use as material except this one and special it back to the field. Danmari can be special summoned from our hand when an attack is declared involving one of our other Ignister monsters and can negate the attack. If we control a Link 6 or higher on the field, you can banish this card from your field or grave and negate one face-up card your opponent controls. Surprisingly, this effect has come up for me more times than I thought it would, which is why I've kept this card in my main deck. With how easy it is to bring out Singularity, I've had moments when I've had my Singularity set up on the field and this either on the field or in the grave, and I just thought, why not? And Gachiri shields our Cyberse monsters by allowing them to survive a single attack once per turn. It can be special summoned by targeting one Cyberse monster we control and negating its effect, and when it's sent from the field to the grave, you can target one face-up monster you control, and that monster is now unaffected by your opponent's card effects until the end of the turn. It's also pretty bulky at 3000 defense, so that definitely comes in handy too. Once again, this isn't the real Bururu that you need. You want the green one, not the purple one. And finally, to close out, I play 3 copies of Ash and 2 Nibiru. It's so important that we run more disruptions in this deck because it's more focused on getting out our extra deck army and using their effects to bounce off of each other to power up to the fullest. And the more we can link summon and synchro and exceed and even fusion summon, the better. We do utilize almost all of the extra deck summon mechanics in here, so it's important that we can do so at every turn and opportunity that we can get. So that's it for the monsters, and now onto the spells. It's largely the same as last time with only a couple of tweaks here and there. So first up is 3 Signet Mining, now even more essential than ever this time around. 1 Signet Ritual and 2 Signet Codex. I also play 1 Mathmech Equation, which is extra useful for bringing back our Mathmechs from grave, and it also boosts them by 1000 attack, which is neat. And for traps, I'm just playing 1 Signet Conflict, again very helpful for disruption, which we need in here, 1 Signet Circuit, and 3 Infinite Impermanence. That disruption is important, guys, and it only gets better with our extra deck, which I'll cover next. So now jumping into the extra deck, and man, this was probably the hardest part of putting this together, just because there's so many options that you can go for when building this. On the one hand, I still wanted to keep the main focus on the Firewall monsters because this is primarily a Firewall deck, but on the other hand, there's so many other Cyberse monsters that you can use to take full advantage of the Cyberse network and maximize on the strategy. I'm still changing it and tweaking it and kind of on the fly depending on what I'm up against, but for now, this is my current build. So with wanting to still keep it primarily Firewall and utilizing the Mathmech and Ignisters engines, this is what I've come up with. So to start is our Firewall cards involving the OG Firewall Dragon. Of course, you gotta have him or it's not really a Firewall deck. Firewall Dragon Dark Fluid, who has been made so much better now with the new support now, and because we run a wider range using all of the summon types like Synchro, Fusion, and Xyz, the more we have of those in the grave, the stronger he gets. It also serves as our big negator of the deck too. We then have Firewall Dragon Dark Fluid Neo Tempest Terahertz, which is such a cool and crazy name, but it has the power to match too. It also serves as a big negator and is great for using to set up for our Singularity. Again, it lets you send one Cyberse from your deck or extra deck to the grave and gains the attribute of the monster and then gains 2500 attack on top of that. It's perfect and was a cool addition to making the Firewall archetype be able to stand on its own as an archetype. And then of course we have our big boss Firewall Dragon Singularity. Not only does it have a super bounce effect, but it also has a monster reborn effect when a card it points to is destroyed, and then lets you special summon a Cyberse monster from your grave. It absolutely benefits from having a wider range of extra deck types, so we're looking to take full advantage. Then we have our Deceive Worm, who's technically not a Firewall monster, but this is our fusion of the deck and is our target from Cyberse Sage, which is how we get to it. I do keep our Code Talkers in here, having only the essential ones though, with Trans Code Talker, the new Protect Code Talker, who will be essential for our Firewall boss, and I do play the new Link Decoder. I opted for this instead of Code Talker because it just works better for this. It's a Link 1 that only takes one level 4 or lower Cyberse monster. When it's sent to the grave as a Link material for a Cyberse Link monster with 2300 attack or more, you can special summon it back to the field, but then banish it when it leaves the field after. It helps streamline our Link climbs just a little bit easier and helps get us up just a bit faster. And then of course, the most essential Code Talker monster ever, Access Code Talker. Again, I play him because he belongs here and not because he's a generic means to an end. He's one of my favorite boss monsters ever. I play one Cyber Switch in here. Cyber Switch is part of our ritual pack involving Sage and Deceive Worm. And then next in, we have our Mathmech boss with Mathmech Alimbertion, a card that when Xyz summoned, gains effects depending on the number of materials used to summon it. If 2 were used, you can add one Mathmech card from your deck to your hand. If 3 were used, you can add one level 4 monster from your deck to your hand. And if 4 were used, you can add any one spell or trap from your deck to your hand. This is all once per turn of course, and I can't forget about its first effect, which lets you tribute one monster to special summon one level 4 Mathmech monster from your hand or grave. It's a very useful card, but it's my only Mathmech boss that I play in this build just because I'm so strapped for space in here. Then up next are Ignister monsters. I play one Lingerivo and one Wind Pegasus at Ignister. Pegasus lets you destroy spells and traps up to the number of Ignister monsters that you control, and if another card that you control is destroyed by battle or card effect while this card is on the field or in the grave, then you can banish this card. Then target one card your opponent controls and shuffle it back into the deck, which is very good. And then lastly, I did debate a lot if I wanted to have this in the build too, but I do play the Arrival Cyberse at Ignister. It just works so well for this deck build. You will be able to get it out a little easier due to how much special summoning and material you can have on the field to link off into it, and lets you just pop a monster on the field and lets you summon a token which you can use for whatever you want. And then of course, we play one IP Masquerader to finish it all off. And that's it for the deck. This is my Firewall full burst deck that utilizes more of the Cyberse typing's different archetypes and engines to make it play at a more optimal level than the previous version that I showcased, which focused solely on Firewall and Code Talkers, which was more of a pure build. Some quick things to note about the deck again, it's not focused on you locking your opponent, and though that is still kind of possible, it's not something that you're always aiming for. So keep that in mind when you're choosing what cards you're going to run when you build and play around with your own version of this deck. It's also not focused on Ibli locking either, but I just play the one copy because it can come up. Now I know I've said it multiple times already, but it's worth repeating. You have a lot of options for what you can do with the Cyberse deck. Unlike the Galaxy Ice decks that I created and went over before, Cyberse have a lot of cards that really do help you, but it's more about what are you trying to accomplish and what's what's your end goal with it all, and then using the necessary cards to build around that. Now real quick before we go, let me go over some other optional cards that you can absolutely run in this build just like before. It's going to be very quick, but Cyberse Secretary is a useful extender in any cyber-centric deck as always, and Lady Debug is also amazing for starting and extending for us. I know that it's criminal that I don't have Debug in the main deck, but this is just the on-the-spot profile for now, and I'll probably be moving her back to the main deck soon. Of course, there's so many more other Cyberse monsters that you can experiment with, but I'm mainly taking these from the previous build. For the extra deck, this is where it got really tricky for me because I'm so tight on space already, but I think you can definitely find room for Splash Mage in here because that card just helps you out so much, and it killed me that I couldn't fit it in. I had it in earlier builds, but I opted to switch it out just for a while so I could experiment with the Arrival Ignister, and fitting that into the deck was already so stressful. Update Jammer is also a card that is considered essential for these types of decks, but because of the direction that I wanted to take this deck in, I opted not to run it, though I really wanted to. If I really wanted to, I'd probably remove Cyberse Witch in favor of one of them, but that would also require me to shift the main deck a little with the ritual package that's already in there. Crusadia is also another one that could find its way in here very easily, but I just don't know where to swap it out. Cyberse Wicked is a card that helps out a bunch as well and can retrieve us a tuner, and obviously it's never essential, but I just think it's really cool. Firewall Dragon is a card that I want in here so badly just to add to the firepower of the deck, but it's not very essential in this version of the build. Again, always feel free to add or remove any cards that you see fit. Keep in mind that with Cyberse decks, you always want to keep them as close to the minimum 40 card count as you can, so tweak and play around with your ratios. But anyways guys, that's gonna do it for my Firewall full burst deck profile. Let me know what you guys think of the deck, if you've played around with it, and let me know how you go. I definitely always recommend to at least try the Cyber strategy, even if it's just straight code talkers. Let me know how you guys go, and I'll see you guys in the duel arena.